Hello, I'm Esther Gido-Yuot. It's Wednesday, August 24th. This is Africa 54.
Angolan President João Lourenço and opposition candidate Adalberto Costa Jr. of the Union for the Total Independence of Angola party cast their ballots in Luanda on Wednesday in what's expected to be a tight election race, in which the main opposition coalition appears to have its best ever chance of victory.
We
have just exercised our right to vote. It's fast and simple. We advise all eligible citizens to do the same. In the end, we will all win. Democracy wins and Angola wins.
Angolan voter Alberto Lima expressed his excitement over the day's events.
We expect a big day, and I believe Angolan people will look at it as a celebration because it is a democracy. Many people say democracy does not exist in Angola, but the effects of democracy will be seen as all Angolans head to the polls.
Since its independence from Portugal in 1975, Angola has been run by the formerly Marxist People's Movement for the Liberation of Angola, or MPLA, led since 2017 by Lourenço. Lourenço, who is seeking re-election, voted in the early morning at a polling station in Luanda surrounded by heavy security. He encouraged citizens to go out and cast their votes. Despite nearly 5 decades in power, and billions of dollars worth of oil pumped, the MPLA-led government has failed to lift Angola's overwhelmingly young populace out of poverty. Citizens under 25s make up 60% of the population, and more than half are unemployed. The ruling party remains favorite, but the margin is narrow enough for a surprise UNITA victory, which could shift relations with global superpowers, with possibly less friendly ties with Russia. An Afrobarometer survey in May showed UNITA's opposition coalition, led by Adalberto Costa Jr., increasing its share to 22% from 13% in 2019. In a tense run-up to the vote for both president and parliament, UNITA urged voters to stay near polling stations after voting to reduce the risk of fraud. Analysts say tweaked vote counting rules may delay official results by days. Clara Frank, VOA News, Washington.
Clara, thank you for that report. Polls across Angola are closing soon, but earlier voters formed lines in anticipation of casting their ballots. From Luanda, VOA's Mayra de la Salette tells us about Election Day.
Today is a big day in Angola. It's Election Day. We are at a school here in the capital, which is working as a polling station. Queues started to form very early, as many people will have to report back to work. MPLA candidate João Lourenço voted in the Coqueiros neighborhood in Luanda at Lusíada University. Upon leaving, Mr. João Lourenço advised all voters to exercise their right to vote, saying that Angola wins. The UNITA candidate Adalberto Costa Jr. voted in the outskirts of Luanda. Mr. Costa Jr. said he was happy to have voted with his people. He also appealed to everyone to vote and denounced the absence of the electoral books. On this 24th of August, about 14 million people are eligible to vote in Angola and in the diaspora. This election is also historic for that reason. The people we spoke with shared their expectations of today, saying that this is a very special moment and this is the way they have to contribute for the country. The polling stations open at 7 a.m. and they will close at 5 p.m. local time.
And joining us now from Luanda, Angola, is journalist Israel Campos. Israel, welcome to Africa 54.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So the polls have closed. Tell us, what's the latest update? Were there any incidents? How did it go?
Well, yes, here what I speak from in the capital, Luanda, city center of capital, in a school, the polling station has already closed. So now it's the time where internal arrangements are going to be made. The day went very peaceful and quiet here in Luanda, at least, because we were expecting people to go and do the vote and sit down movement, which has been widely spread across social media. However, from the polling stations that we've been to this morning and in the afternoon here in Luanda, we didn't see much people joining this movement. So people are actually voting and going home. And it feels like a very normal day here in Luanda. People just went to vote and then just, went home and got off, just go on with their lives, going to work or and the other commitments. So it seems like a very peaceful and normal day here where we are.
Israel, it's been said this is a vote for the youth of Angola, that there's so many of them that came out to vote. What do the youth of Angola want to see in this election?
Yes, today during during the time that we're going to visit the polling stations, we spoke to a lot of young people, and they are telling us that this election means hope to them. It means that something can be changed in the Angolan's reality. And they are very happy and optimistic about the fact that they can be part of changing the Angola history course. They have been telling us that education, access to a better healthcare system are very key elements to them. Unemployment is very high here. The youth unemployment rate at around 60%, according to official data from Angola. That's a lot of young people without anything to do, not being able to go to school, nor being able to have a job. And that's one of the biggest concerns for the Angolan youth as well. So whoever wins this election has to take into account those concerns, because Angola is a very young country, and they made up most of this country's population. So it's very important that whoever gets into the office to rule Angola for the next 5 years take into consideration those aspects.
And quickly, Israel, when does Angola expect the final results?
Well, that's another very tricky question, and that's the question everyone's been asking here in Luanda, in Angola, because we don't know. That's the answer. The law says that the National Electoral Commission has up to 15 days to announce the final results. Well, that's a very, very long time for many people here. We don't know. In the past elections, they have been announced in 3 to 5 days around those period of time. But now we don't know. It's very uncertain. And because there are other very relevant political events happening here in the country, such as the arrival of the body of late former President José Eduardo Santos, whose body, we've been told that his funeral is scheduled to happen very soon as the following weekend. So we don't actually know which impact that would have in the announcement of the final results. So that's the question we have all been looking to get an answer to. In a few minutes, the National Electoral Commission is going to hold a press conference just to brief the journalists on how this process went, and we'll be there to bring up with more updates.
Israel, many thanks. Thank you so much for your reporting. Israel Campos is an Angolan journalist. Now, Kenyan opposition politician Raila Odinga is accusing Electoral Commission Chairman Wafula Chebukati of, quote, standing by injustices, even as 4 Electoral Board commissioners disagreed with him on his declaration that outgoing Deputy President William Ruto won the presidential race. Odinga has filed a petition with Kenya's Supreme Court alleging fraud and is asking the court to nullify Ruto's win. A short time ago, I spoke to Charles Kanjama, a Kenyan constitutional lawyer, and I began by asking him how many petitions have been filed challenging the outcome of the August 9th presidential results.
So 9 petitions have been filed that we are aware of. 8 of the petitions are seeking to quash the declaration of president-elect, and they are giving roughly similar grounds. And the 9th petition is seeking to challenge any potential declaration of Raila Odinga, who was the runner-up, as president-elect, assuming the court was to have such a power.
Now, what are some of the sticking points from Mr. Odinga's petition so far?
So he's raised a number of points. One are issues to do with the infrastructure, the electoral infrastructure, preparation for the elections. He says that there was a report that had been given to KPMG. They had been requested to do an audit report of the electoral infrastructure, and they identified several shortcomings with the electoral register, the register of voters, and with some of the technology that was deployed for the elections. And they are saying that these demonstrated weaknesses. A second concern they have is that on the election day, there were some areas where some of the other elections were suspended. And they are saying that that caused a suppression of voters, because some voters did not go to vote. He's also claiming that there are discrepancies in relation to the numbers, that this has to do with the voter turnout, that there is an indication, according to him, that there was manipulation of voter turnout figures. And he also says that the figures that were eventually supplied by the presiding officers in the polling stations to IEBC, because this happens electronically during voting, it has a discrepancy of 140,000 with the total reported votes by IEBC. And next, he has also made an allegation that there was a sophisticated criminal enterprise that hacked into the IBC network, the network of the Electoral Commission, that there was a team of 56 hackers who managed to penetrate the system. They were receiving the result declaration forms, which are handwritten, and replacing them with other result declaration forms where they were systematically reducing the votes of Raila Odinga and increasing the votes of William Ruto, the one who was declared the winner.
If I may interject there, this is the report that came out on Tuesday from the former anti-corruption czar, John Githongo, alleging that some aides, a personal aide of President-elect William Ruto, worked with certain individuals to hack in the system. Is that what you're alluding to? And has this also been included in Odinga's petition?
Yes. So in Odinga's petition, there are several affidavits supporting the petition. And one of the affidavits is by John Githongo, who previously headed the anti-corruption body in Kenya. And what John Githongo has done in his affidavit is he says that he received evidence from a whistleblower who he interviewed. The whistleblower insisted on remaining anonymous, and he declined to give the evidence directly. So the evidence appears in the form of a conversation that has been captured in John Githongo's affidavit.
So how is President-elect's team reacting to that? If this individual doesn't want his or her name to be revealed, and given the severity of such an allegation, what might be the outcome of this added query on what happened on August 9th?
So there are timelines that have been put in place for presenting documents and responses to the court. The team of Raila Odinga had 7 days after the declaration of results to file their petition, and anyone else who was interested. And then the respondents have 4 days to file their responses. And because the petitions were filed on Monday and today is Wednesday, there are still 2 more days for them to file their responses. Actually, they were to be served on Tuesday, so they still have 3 days to file their responses. So I'm sure that the Electoral Commission, as well as the team of Kenya Kwanza, of President-elect William Ruto, are now preparing their responses. They have not yet shared them with the court or with the public.
That was Charles Kanjama, a Kenyan constitutional lawyer, talking to me earlier via Skype from Nairobi. Fighting erupted between government forces and Tigrayan rebels in northern Ethiopia on Wednesday, with the warring sides blaming each other for shattering a 5-month-old truce. The renewed warfare was unleashed after both sides repeatedly blamed each other for the lack of progress in efforts to hold negotiations to try to end the brutal 21-month conflict. The Tigray People's Liberation Front says government forces and their allies launched a large-scale offensive in the direction of southern Tigray early Wednesday. But the government communication service accused the TPLF of striking first, saying it had destroyed the truce. The rival claims could not be independently verified as access to northern Ethiopia is restricted. The Al-Shabab terrorist group continues to destabilize Somalia, even as newly elected President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud promises to go on an all-out war to eliminate the group. Early this month, Somalian Prime Minister appointed Mukhtar Robo, a former deputy leader of the Al-Shabab militant group, to as Minister for Endowment and Religious Affairs, a move analysts say has infuriated the terrorist group. Attackers on Friday invaded the Hyatt Hotel with 2 car bombs and killed dozens of people before security forces freed dozens of other people held hostage. For more on Al-Shabaab's continued threat to Somalia, I'm joined live via Skype from Washington by Mohammed Olad, senior editor with VOA's Somali service. Mohammed, welcome again to Africa 54.
Thank you, Esther, and thank you for having me here.
Now, Mohammed, President Mohamud has made several promises to deal with the Al-Shabaab terrorist group. He made that promise a couple of years earlier. He has been re-elected as president. What seems to be standing in the way of dealing with this group?
Well, according to analysts in Somalia, particularly military analysts, they say that the Somali government is not in a position to fight completely with Al-Shabaab in terms of logistics, in terms of military forces, their trainings, in terms of counter-terrorism response strategies. And this has been going on for a long time. And Somali government, when there is a government and that government gets out of the position and new government comes in, so these transitional periods of 4 years, sometimes 5 years, have been derailing the efforts of the government. Also, the African Union peacekeepers are in Mogadishu. There's no big and great coordination between the two forces. The African Union carry out their attacks under their command, while the Somali government forces carry out their attacks under their command. So some kind of lack of coordination, has been the major culprit for the failure of dealing with Al-Shabaab immediately.
Mohammed, as we said in the introduction, the Al-Shabaab group is infuriated by the fact that Mukhtar was appointed as a cabinet minister by the prime minister. What do you know about this allegation? Is Al-Shabaab after this new minister?
Well, this guy, before he defected to the government in 2013, he was already fighting with Al-Shabaab while he was inside the places they have been controlling in Bakool region. He had a group of fighters, he had supporters there, and he several times fought with Al-Shabaab in the area before he defected to the government. When Al-Shabaab tried to defeat his militia, he defected to the government. So he was already against their ideology. Particularly, Mukhtar Robo was against the killing of innocent people in large numbers. People remember him a time he captured some warlords in his region, by region, and he released them without harming. So they always considered him to be less extreme and kind of a moderate guy within the core and leadership of Al-Shabaab. That's why they have been against him. And since when he joined the government, he was not immediately trusted. And even though he came through negotiations with the government, he ran for a position, the governor of Bai region, where he comes from. And the government, since 2013, and then the government made him, put him into house arrest and he has been there for a long time. So when this government came and Hassan Sheikh Mohamud came into power, he was out of the house arrest, and he was nominated the religious affairs minister, which was a very surprise to everybody, very surprise to Al-Shabab itself. Immediately they responded, and they said that this guy is more dangerous than the government. Yes, of course, the Al-Shabab is very angry because this man is a minister, and he knows more about their tactics, he knows more about their strategies, and he knows more about where they get their support economically and strategically.
Mohammed, thank you very much for your analysis on this. Mohammed Olad is a VOA senior Somali editor. Hundreds of South African union members marched in Pretoria and Cape Town Wednesday in protest over soaring inflation, low wages, taxes and unemployment, despite government threats that public employees would lose their payroll. Video labor shows unrest, often affecting companies and sectors such as mining during wage negotiations. But it is rare for COSATU, an ally of the ruling African National Congress, to arrange a national demonstration to make its voice heard. Protesters chanted songs and marched towards Pretoria's union buildings, which houses President Cyril Ramaphosa's office, holding placards saying "Stop taxing basic food items."
The purpose of the march today is to send a very strong message to our government to stop austerity measures. And having stopped the austerity measures is to send another message to business to account in this particular country and create jobs, because their strike on investment in our country is not going to help anybody. And therefore, we cannot continue with this particular high cost of living in our country, whether it's electricity, it's transport, it's food. These things must then be able to stop, because our people are suffering.
That lies, that percentage of the unemployment rate is not even where we were before COVID. We were already in crisis before COVID. We were already actually the junk status in this economy before COVID. Now this percentage, we will only start thinking about if they reverse and drop until below where we were before COVID.
Inflation in South Africa accelerated to its highest level in 13 years in July, pushed mainly by surging prices for food, transport and electricity, according to official data. Tuso Kumalo has more from the streets of Johannesburg.
These workers say the rising cost of living, food and fuel has become unbearable. While taxes and interest rates continue to rise, their salaries remain unchanged. They say the nationwide march today was a strong warning and statement to the government.
With the cost of just cooking oil being at 200 rand a 2 litre, and when people are unemployed, when people are not even getting the 350 SRD grants, and when we are crying for a BIG, because we are calling for our government to implement the BIG, basic income grant of 1.5 for the unemployed.
They have given the government an ultimatum to address their concerns or meet a series of national shutdown and work stoppage that could plunge the economy into more trouble. Tuso Kumalo for VOA News, Johannesburg.
Goodwin risked everything for a better life in Europe, but he was detained and ransomed in Libya by European Union-backed authorities, accused of extreme abuse against captured migrants. Roll video, the 34-year-old Nigerian paid 1,100 euros for a place on an overcrowded vessel from the Libyan port of Zawiya, heading for Italian shores via the world's deadliest migration route. Those hopes were dashed when a Libyan patrol boat approached. Godwin says he was so reluctant to avoid going back to Libya that he considered throwing himself into the sea. But he was detained and dragged back to Libya, where he was only released after his family paid a 550 euro ransom.
I paid 600,000 to go to Europe. After they tried to put me in the boat, after when we are going, we go just in it too. Libya police that came, they hold us. They returned us back to Libya. Now I'm just in Libya suffering, no work, there is no food to chop, nothing. We are just living like, just try to live.
That's fine. Human Rights Watch says over 32,000 people were intercepted by Libyan forces last year and returned detention and abuse in the war-ravaged country as European countries turned a blind eye. We're excited to hear what you think about Africa 54 and all our VOA Africa programs on our website at voaafrica.com. We'll be right back after this short break.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, join me, Vincent McCory, as we follow the contested elections in Kenya, where William Ruto was declared president. Longtime opposition leader Raila Odinga challenges the results and asks the Supreme Court to nullify the outcome of the vote. We'll also take a look at the general elections in Angola, where a tight race is expected between President João Lourenço, running for a second term, against opposition leader Alberto Costa Jr. In-depth analysis on the elections in Angola and Kenya on the next Straight Talk Africa.
U.S. officials say the government handed over to Nigeria $23 million Tuesday, taken by former military ruler Sani Abacha. Abacha ruled Africa's most populous nation and top oil exporter from 1993 until his death in 1998, during which time Transparency International estimated that he took up to $5 billion of public money. Abacha was never charged, and U.S. Ambassador Mary Beth Leonard says the cash was in British accounts but was identified and frozen by U.S. officials. U.S. President Joe Biden on Wednesday praised the extraordinary courage and dedication to freedom of the Ukrainian people in fending off Russian fighters 6 months into Moscow's invasion. This as he continued U.S. support for Kiev's forces with nearly $3 billion in new military aid. On Ukraine's Independence Day, marking 31 years since escaping Soviet rule in 1991, Biden says the day is not only a celebration of the past, but a resounding affirmation that Ukraine proudly remains and will remain a sovereign and independent nation. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thank you for watching.